Alrighty, so welcome to week 2. We're going to write queries and we're going to learn a new workflow. So you've learned the get workflow, so now you're going to learn a new one. But before we jump into the graded part, because just know your attendance is actually a graded item in this case, there's a little bit of housekeeping we're going to have to do and a few announcements. So we'll do this first in this video and then you'll see videos for the rest. So the first thing is to Brianna's hours will be listed probably by the time you get here, and her Zoom schedule as well will be on there. But you'll find those over in the course, so actually in the course itself, and you notice this hopefully in week 0 is that Brianna's listed here. We're just probably at this point waiting for her hours for this semester. Okay, so just go back there and check those out as well and ask. Discord would be a great place to ask for that. And I'll talk about Discord in a minute on an announcement at the bottom. So today, before we get jumping into the graded work, I realized in setting up and for this week that there's something I actually needed to change because we are using GitHub Codespace. I think most of you are at this point. I'm recording this right before the start of the semester, so I'm not sure. But I am recommending, as you heard me say in week 1, to use Codespace. But regardless of how, and again, I suspect most of you are using Codespace for your development environment, I had said that there's a 120-hour limit across all of your classes. And again, that's because if you happen to be taking other classes that use a code space, you just need to understand that. Now, one of the things today, as I was looking around, because there used to be a fairly easy way for you to see your code space, but they've kind of changed it. So I actually ended up doing a little conversation back and forth with Gemini about this and talking about this 120-hour limit. So it talks about where you should be able to see this. And I just want to show you this, and hopefully this works. This is kind of the case in tech in general. It's like, and LLMs may not always be correct. I actually checked this also against other places to see, and because GitHub is changing their user interface, in other words, what that means is all the options available, sometimes things aren't where we want them to be or where somebody tells us they are. This is fairly common, unfortunately. So I'm going to actually go here to the repo that I'm going to end up using to show you this first part where how you should be able to find this. Now mine's going to look differently because of the type of account I have, but in general, this should work. And if it doesn't, please reach out to me, because what we want to know is how your usage is going. And again, I had said this in week 1, most students don't run into this 120-hour thing, but you can also upgrade, which I'll talk about next. So if you go over to wherever you're, and I think it's good to put your picture here, but you get to choose that. So if I come over to because right now, let me just be clear, we're in our GitHub organization under your private repo, or that's where I'm at currently. In order to find this usage, you go over to wherever your user navigation is, and you go to settings. So in this case, it's here. So under settings, there's a billing and then there's a usage. And I started here under overview, and in overview, now again, this is because I have a pro level account. I'm not going to see it the way you would. I think you will actually see it somewhere like here in your code space or even in actions, but you can also actually now go to usage and maybe you'll be able to see it here. So I just want you to know that these would be the places I would start with. And again, by this time, hopefully I've reached out to a couple of students and had them tell me, hey, what do you see here? Now, having said that, but just to be clear, I went to the user account, I went to settings, and under settings, I went to billing, and then I started in overview, and then I also looked at usage. But I think this actually should give you, and again, you get 120 hours free for just a free level account. Okay, So just know that that's the case and that's how to check. But again, maybe we'll just kind of figure this out because the user interface changes. Now you can upgrade this to 180, and actually in this case, it actually showed me that students actually can get a student developer pack and you get 180, okay? So you get 180 minutes. And I gave you the link here to upgrade if you feel like you just, and by the way, it's not a bad thing to just upgrade it. Now, if you're working locally, this is not an issue, okay? But if you are working on CodeSpace, which again, the majority of you are, you'll want to just know how to go here. And I think what you have to do is sign up for the student developer pack. I actually can't do it because of the type of account I have, but you can walk through this. And I think they do require maybe an ID to be uploaded, so it is worth it. If you don't have a student ID, definitely consider getting one. All right, so we're going to shift a little bit here because I'm actually going to have you do something now, because the reason I ended up getting to this code space usage was I was actually looking at the way our code spaces are set up, and I was reflecting upon something that, again, GitHub has changed over the time that I've used it, even in the last year, by defaulting some things that we're going to turn off. So I'm going to have you do a little more setup in your private repos, okay? So we're going to open up our code space and go to your private repo. So I'll just walk you through that, right? So I'm going to end up I'm going to hit back and back again. But the way you could do this is actually just let me go back one more because I was playing around a little bit. So what you can do is just go to GitHub. And when you're in CIT28, right, so you're inside of our course organization, you can go to repos. And in here, you will only see public repos and your individual private one. Now, I decided today I was going to set up a new one just because I thought, I think it's good to do this. And so you'll start seeing different repos that'll show up here. You won't see this list because some of these are private to my account. But wherever your private repo is, go ahead and click into it. So this shows you, based on where we finished week 1, the files that are in your GitHub. Now, this is not your code space, and this is really one of the things you start to get used to, is like when you're looking here, right, you're looking at the web interface that shows you your files on GitHub. And so what you want to do is actually come over to code and come over to here, and then you will have already, based on last week, and again, if you're working locally, this won't be true, but again, most of you are probably here, you will see the name of your code space, okay? So now I'm going to go ahead and click on this. Now what it's going to do is, for this instance, it's going to take me out of my GitHub GitHub file listing, and it's going to take me to CodeSpace. But sometimes when you're first working in CodeSpace and working on the web, it's hard to tell which one you're in. And this is one of the reasons I changed what I'm about to show you, and then we're going to do a little setup. So at the very bottom, one of the things I do is I come over to themes and I go over to color. And then in here, sometimes I will do like maybe a dark theme. Now, why do I do that? Because it just, for me, it kind of helps me distinguish. You don't have to do it. It's not required. I'm just kind of showing you some of the things that you can change. I think this file one, I think I just have by default SETI. And I think what we'll see here is when we start to create the files, you may see that there. Again, not required. Okay. So I just want to show you this. So now, right, we're in our code space. We now have a development environment built on the files from our GitHub. So coming back now to our attendance, I'm going to have you create, last week or in, week 1, you created that git ignore file. It was a different kind of file because it started with a period. So in this case, we're going to create a folder that actually has this, and it'll be dev container, and then we'll create a new kind of file. Now, these are just setup files. We typically don't do this on an ongoing basis. Matter of fact, this week you're going to learn how to create SQL files, which will be really something you'll do again and again. So this right here is like a one-time setup, okay? So in your private repo, we're going to create a new folder and file, right? And I should have put a comma here. The folder name is .dev container, and the file name within that is devcontainer.json. And it's very important that you actually create this exactly as I'm going to show you, and then I'll show you how to copy this content in here, and then we'll actually do the git workflow as a good reminder. It'll be a little different because we're going to actually specify the folder here. So, just the more experience in here, but again, this is a one-time setup just to get you started, and then we'll do one last thing, harping back to the whole AI thing. But now, coming back here, I'm going to go ahead, and now I'm in my private repo. I can see that. I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to go to folder. So remember, if you hover over these, it will actually show you new file and new folder. And when I click new folder, it should be at the same level as my Git help and my querying that we created last week. So .dev container. Okay, so .dev container, no spaces, no capitalization. Very specifically, this is what you want to create. You hit enter. So now we have a new folder, and so within this folder, we're going to create a new file, okay? So in here, and now we don't do the dot here, we do dev container, but this time we do file extension JSON. And notice how that icon shows up, and these are actually all good things to at least know something about. But .json is a type of file that is used commonly in programming development and web development. So, and even in data analytics and other ways as well. So it's a type of file. You're actually going to see it in a minute. And I'm going to hit enter here. Okay. Now, this is what we're going to end up starting to disable in your accounts, because the thing is, by default now, code spaces are actually AI integrated, and because you're going to be doing a technical interview, having this in here will not help you, because in a tech interview you won't have it. And as I said before, the idea of this class is actually for you to learn to code on your own without the assistance of AI tools. Okay, so now come back over here, and now grab this, copy that. Okay, so copy that. Okay, you can either do this or you can use your keyboard shortcuts, whichever makes sense for you, and come over to this file that we created. Now this green means these are untracked files, and we're about to actually have them tracked. And then that just means we're doing our Git workflow. So I'm going to paste this. Okay, so what this is doing is, in your private repo, right, there's a file that's going to block all things like Copilot and other things in here. Okay, so now we have these two files, and by the way, this will be something I'll look at. So if you don't have it in there, I'm going to flag you and say, hey, you got to make sure you have this set up in your repos. Okay, so now we're here, and if you don't see terminal, right, you could come over to here, and I believe you can go to terminal and open a new terminal. Mine by default is already open, and you can see even here you start to get some of this integration, which is why we're going to end up doing version controlling this file. And when I say version controlling, I mean the Git workflow. So we're going to do that git add, but unlike star, we're actually going to specify the folder here. Okay, so let's actually do that. So let's come back over here. So I'm going to do git add.dev. Now I'm specifying the folder here. And notice how I'm in the repo, what we call root of the repo. Okay, so when I do that, so what happens here is it actually archives not only the folder, but also the file itself. And so now what I'm going to do is git, okay, and let's, if you want to remember, and always good to remember, like if you want to try it on your own, here's your commit message. This is all you have to have. So git commit actually commits it, and then we'll push it. Okay, so we'll do git commit -m for message, double quote, and dev container, end quote. Now, if you hit enter and you don't have all that done, it can throw it into a little bit of a loop, but you can always just trash it and start again, because you need to actually do the commit here. Cool, and notice how, again, the colors help you tells you kind of what's happening here. Not kind of, because if it's here, that means you have at least done the git add, you've staged it, and you've committed it. So now we do that git push. Okay, so remember what git push does. So right now, and I'm going to show you this because I think it is really helpful to see. I'm going to go back to my repo on the GitHub interface. Oh, sorry, wrong one, different one. This is the one I set up today. Okay. So if I come back, remember this is where I started today, right? So in here I went to code and I opened up my code space, right? So notice though today, now that I've made this one change in my GitHub user file interface, I actually see one change here. And what this means is inside of my code space, I have a change that has not been pushed. And you can see that because that file folder combination is not on GitHub. And when you're working inside of your code space, that is only what you see, right? Until you do this step, which is git push. So this is going to take that content and it's going to push it over to the interface, and that's where you ultimately end up sharing it with me. And I'm just going to show you back over here. I'm going to hit refresh, and so now what will happen, if you've done it, you should see that new folder, and inside of there you will see that new file. Okay, so let's go ahead and just back out of here. All right, so that is part of what we'd have to do, okay? And I'm actually going to show you how to, again, stop your code space because that's helpful. But before we do that, there's one other thing I'm going to have you do today, which is we're going to change the build with agent window inside VS Code. Because again, I know it can be tempting to want to use AI tools, and I'm just trying to remove that because I'm going to say it again, when you're taking my class, when you're taking a technical interview, you won't be able to use these tools, and nor do they really help you when you're just beginning to learn. Okay, so now over here, and I will walk you through this. I don't actually have more instruction but that. So let me go over here. So over here, notice all of you now, and this is where when you watched my week 1 video, this actually wasn't part of what CodeSpace had by default. So now that they do, and I realize in setting up week 2, I needed to cover it today. So here's what I want you to do, is I want you to come over to, notice there's some, it says chat. So this whole window, I could just hit X, but it'll come back next time. So here's what you need to do, is you want to go over to these 3 dots. So it has a plus, it has a gear, and then it has 3 dots. So those 3 dots, and then where it says show view by default, is I want you to click that off, okay? And now stop it. All right, so what that should do now is actually stop it to where the next time you come in, but we're actually going to check that just to make sure. Okay, all right, so I'm going to close this. I have that already done. And this is where, harping back to what we started with this 120 hours, the reason you want to have what I will call good practices around your code space to utilize that time effectively. Because right now, if you were just to stop that tab, it actually hangs out for like a 30-minute thing, and that's, or a 30-minute timeout. And that's one of the things in here that GitHub, when I was chatting with Jim and I was talking about understanding how to stop your code space. So let me just show you, right, how to manage this to get more use of those 120 hours, and it's just good practice. So I'm going to come down here to my code space, my name here, and I'm going to hit stop. So I'm going to stop completely that code space. And by doing this, it's actually taking that, because in this case, guess what happens is this is a virtualized container, therefore the dev container. And we're not going to cover containers in this class. It's way beyond where this class is targeted, but it's also good to learn about things that you will probably hear about later, okay? And containers are a thing, and they basically are little slices of computers that you get to use. So this is CodeSpace giving you that. All right, so now once it's stopped, you can come back here. And if I come back, by the way, now to my GitHub user face, that typical website listing of the files, which by the way, remember, you don't change in here from the time we started, when we did a little bit of setup in the Get Help, you no longer are going to, actually, I think Get Help we didn't do here. But in this case, I just want to show you that now that we've done that, it says no changes. So that means everything that I have on my GitHub, right, interface here, right, it is the same as what's in my code space. And by the way, the reason this becomes important is I've had it happen to a couple students. So I think it's just worth mentioning. If anything ever happens and your code space won't open, and by the way, there's actually a thing I can show you if it's up or if there's having issues. But in general, as long as this has no changes in the future, if you ever needed to, you could just delete it. Now, again, I don't recommend it, but if you ever had part of troubleshooting, that might come up. And what we're really kind of going over is when you're working in tech, there's often multiple things that can come up, okay? So now I'm actually going to go back in. I'm going to go back to my code space, right? Because I want to actually see if those changes that I did by both having that new folder file combination and having checked that to see if that actually made my additional window here go away. Now, the other benefit as code space is spinning up, and this is actually a term we use where it spins up. That is now gone. And now you do see this still, but one thing I do is I just say hide the status, because I think the less things you have to look at on your screen, the better. And notice how this frees up a whole area over here. And now we could have a conversation about why GitHub does this, and it's basically because they're owned by Microsoft, and Microsoft is trying to get more and more people to use Copilot. And for our course, you're not going to be using Copilot. Now, I'm not saying in the future, you may in the future, and you will see, matter of fact, even this week where we actually do use some of the LLM functionality to learn. But for coding purposes, we don't. All right, so for the last topic, just in our, housekeeping before we actually get into the graded work, I'm going to just talk about for a second here Discord, right? So our Discord is a place for, is a key place for collaboration. And that really means between student to student. That's actually what that is intended to be, right? So, and in this case, I just want to give you a few more specific guidelines. Although I mentioned this in the week 0, I think it's worth mentioning now. So let peers help first. So don't, on Discord, if you know Discord, and some of you may, you can tag an individual when you ask a question. But if you do this, then other students may think, well, I couldn't answer that. Maybe even if they knew it, right? Because the idea here is that Discord is really for you to ask each other. Right? Now, if I happen to be there and I happen to be available and I see a question, I will attempt to answer it. But the point of this is just don't tag me, because students may not answer you because they think, oh, only Rio can answer that. And the Discord is really, this is what I want you to know, it's a student-to-student communications, okay? So now Brianna as well may be on there, and if she's available, she may help, okay? But just know the idea is not to tag people. Now, the other thing is we keep it public. So if you have if you're used to Discord and you're like, well, I'll just direct message somebody, you won't be able to direct message me or Brianna. And there's actually reasons from the campus perspective that we have to do that. So just know that if you do happen to send me a direct message, I don't take them. I actually block them. The idea is actually use the inbox for our communication, because that's what the campus requires of me. Okay, I know we did a few things in this first, housekeeping and announcements, but it's just some stuff we need to do. In grading your work this week, I will look to make sure you got all those pieces in there, right? Make sure that does not show up. Get rid of that, because the less things you're going to see on your, oh, look at that. Now I have to double check that one as well. As soon as I start typing, look at that. So invasive. Okay, so now I get to figure that out. In tech, I'm just going to tell you, you're always learning. All right, so this now ends the first part. So now I'll have another video where I actually talk about the graded work. All right, talk to you later.